Welcome, Nick Roberts, to the House of Shadows and Ink. This is, of course, our Shadows and Ink creators, let's say, room of the house, and great to have you here.
Thank you for having me in the House of Shadows and Ink.
It's a pleasure. Okay, so let's see. I'm going to dive right in there and ask something that a lot of people have been wondering. Do you still remember how it felt when you realized the Exorcist house is a hit?
Is a hit. It, I think it was when you sh or Crystal Lake shared the cover on the website or a newsletter. I think it was either a cover or a newsletter. You shared the cover on a newsletter or the website. And I remember someone commented, "This is an auto buy." And that was the first like real like, whoa, someone really wants this. I mean, I loved the cover, but I had a subjective opinion to it, and I liked the story, but the way it took off, and then seeing people continue to talk positively about it, that's when I realized it was something special because of its staying power and the fact that people are still reading it. It didn't feel like, an overnight success or a blow up or anything like that, especially since my first book tanked with my first publisher. So, yeah, it wasn't so much like, "Oh my gosh, I've arrived. This is a hit." It was more like, "Ooh, they like this. This is awesome. This is cool." But yeah, the first like little flurry of butterflies in my stomach was that one person's comment on that they left on your website or newsletter. I forget which one. It must have been the website.
Okay, cool. Because I still remember, I mean, I think Uh, it only had like 12 pre-orders. So nothing special until people actually started reading it and, like word of mouth got started.
Yeah.
And we'll get into word of mouth, social media, and like your following and everything. But later on, um, a few weeks ago, you were on our mastermind group talking about how you wrote that opening scene. And now, when I read your book, this was the open submissions. What year was that? 2020, I think.
Yes.
And I read the prologue and was like, okay, this is a must have. And I mean, it was just a prologue. So I think I basically just jumped into the first two chapters just to see if like, okay, can you deliver on what you're promising there? Read the synopsis and immediately decided this is like, we need this kind of thing. So well done on writing an amazing first three chapters because right now I'm doing open submissions, reading a lot of subs that come in opening chapters, and I'm still looking for that feeling again. So to know like this is a definite hit and not just like a, oh, I hope this is going to be a good one. So I want to try and find another one out there.
Yeah,
Okay,
I can
so
only imagine.
yes,
Are you,
sorry.
are you are you encountering any noticeable AI submissions? That's something I'm curious about on the editorial front.
Once we get to the point where, okay, we ask for the full manuscript and this looks like something we're gonna want, then we run the
Mhm.
tests. But I'm always like on the side of the author, so I'm not gonna run one test and go just off of that. Like there are a few programs out there, and if all of them are like 95% and above, then I'll probably have to look into it at least with the author. So, but yeah,
Interesting.
there might be a lot. And especially if it's like, if you realize this is a brand new author who's written like three books already this year, then you know.
Yeah.
Okay, so yes, back to the mastermind when you talked about, can you tell folks about how you wrote that first one before that scene, before even knowing what's inside the house?
Yeah. So, I just had this general feeling for this character. I had this older man, his name was Merle, and he was a farmer sitting on a rock, and he was by a campfire, and his dog was beside him. And I was just picturing who this guy was. I already knew that I wanted to write a book that takes place on this farm because I had spent time on a similar farm in West Virginia in 1994, and I always knew it would be a cool uh, backdrop for a horror movie. That beautiful juxtaposition of the mountains and the green lands and all that versus the evil that happens there. So I had that. I had the farmer sitting there, Merle on the rock, and I was like, "Who is this guy? What's he thinking about?" All right, so yeah, so I had this character that was sitting there, and when I was thinking about who is this character, what's driving him, what's going on in his world right now, it was more of a feeling of an emotion that I attribute to the book and the film No Country for Old Men. The character that Tommy Lee Jones plays in the movie, Ed Tom Bell, he his pathos, the weight of the world that he carries around, feeling like he's done his tour, he's served his purpose on Earth, and he just and now he's working in a land that he doesn't recognize anymore, and he's scared of it, but he has the courage to still stand up to it. So I was like, well, maybe that's who this guy is. And then my brain said, okay, we've got this guy. What's he scared of? What's going on? And I thought about his house and what was going on inside the house. And I thought it would be creepy if the house was behind him. So as the author, I wasn't writing about what he was seeing. I was only describing what he was hearing. Because I could write about people standing in the windows and stuff being thrown around, but none of that's going to be as scary as what the reader is picturing. If I just say like he hears a woman laughing, and I had all this happening, and then I had his dog, his bloodhound Buck, who was beside him, like really freaking out. He was the reader in the situation because Buck's like, are you going to do anything? There's like stuff happening back behind you in your house. And I wrote one line that he just says that I think sums up the whole character, where he looks at his dog and he calms it, and he just says, "I hear it, Buck. I do."
Mhm.
And he just he starts talking to his dog about the constellations. And at that moment, he's made peace with the fact that he's going to turn around and walk in that house, and he's probably not going to come out. But he's at peace with that, and it he if you've read the story, once he starts to get a little closer to the house, that peace and that courage kind of gets tested a little bit. So, but he still walks in.
Oh no, I'm sure that scene is going to stick with a lot of people for a long time, and I remember that line. Okay, so let's jump to the dog quickly. Like, talking about a dog, you have a dog in Mean-Spirited as well.
Hmm.
Is that like a common theme, or do you bring in a pet as a sort of like connection with the reader?
Well, it's different for each book. With Anathema, I had a dog. That was my first book, and I had a dog because that was the young kid's sort of surrogate best friend. He had parents who had gone through some tumultuous years in their early marriage, and his dog was his best friend. So that was the reason for having. I needed the kid to have someone to confide in and be comforted by in that book. With the Exorcist house, I wanted Buck to be more than just, hey, let's cut to the dog for his reaction. Um, I wanted Buck to be as much of a character as not necessarily as his human counterparts, because I didn't want to make it too noticeable. And I think I could veer into cartoonish if I kept focusing too much on the dog. But I didn't want to just describe it and have it be, in the background sitting there. He plays a pivotal role and, comes in several times during the story and affects the plot and definitely affects the characters. And then after The Exorcist House came out, and I saw how much people liked the dog and the fact that yes, the dog survives the Exorcist house. Um, they they would recommend to other people, and then other people, once they found out a dog was in it, would ask, "Does the dog die?" And that I didn't know that there was this whole subculture of people who will not read anything if a dog dies in it. And that fascinated me. I get it. I worked at a no-kill animal shelter. I love dogs. I have two dogs. I have two cats. I've had dogs my whole life. I don't like seeing dogs die in movies. I don't like reading about it. But I would never not read The Dead Zone because in the opening, Martin Sheen's character, steps on a dog and kills it before going up and solicit a vote or whatever he was doing. It's all contextual. So with Mean Spirited, after seeing how much people cared about Buck and seeing this one line repeated over and over, people say, I don't care what he does to the kids and the adults and the elderly, kill all of them. Just do not touch the dog or I'm out. And as a father, that really resonated with me because I was like, I get it. I get what they're saying. They're so used to seeing people as the victims and they're expendable in horror movies and horror books. They expect people to die. They don't expect or they're not immune to animals getting in harm's way. So I understand it. And that's why with Mean Spirited, after I wrote the prologue and realized this book's the dog kind of stole the show in the prologue. I didn't even intend to have the book
Mhm.
be about a dog. Conehead just sort of, I came up with that name because I thought of a dog walking down the road with a veterinary cone on its neck and then being taken to an animal rescue and then just, from working in a animal rescue, we kind of have to just give animals names and their surface level names. And if a dog comes in with a cone on its head and they say, "Hey, it's Conehead." And I was like, "That's a funny name." So he kind of stole the prologue because I knew I wanted to write about this woman in her up in her second floor of her house, hearing things again with the sound, hearing stuff happening downstairs. And the dog goes down there, and you hear the front door open. And she's in her bathroom upstairs and can't see what's happening. And then she hears the dog bark and then hears the dog run outside. So naturally in my author mind, as I'm writing this, I'm thinking, okay, well, the dog just ran away. I originally had that happen to show the reader that, okay, now she's all alone. Her dog just ran away. She's all really all alone. But then I was like, well, wait, the dog ran away. That means he can come back at some point. I'm going to play with that. So I kind of, found that dog with in the prologue, and I remembered what people said, the reaction they had with the Exorcist house and with Buck the Bloodhound. And I said, well, wait a second here. What if this evil thing that's in the prologue of Mean Spirited is somehow tethered or connected to this dog in some way? And at some point in the story, people are going to have to make a decision.
Mhm.
Am I going to keep this dog around knowing that it puts my children in jeopardy, knowing that it puts my spouse and myself in jeopardy, or am I going to do something about it? whatever that may be. Now, me being a parent who would, if mean-spirited was happening to me, my dog was going crazy and bringing some evil force into my own home, I would have no problem taking the dog out back and just getting rid of it because I'm sorry, I will protect my children at all
Mhm.
costs, especially from supernatural entities and dogs. I love dogs though. But so like when I was writing that book, that was my biggest hurdle. How do I get people to suspend disbelief enough to say, okay, if I was in Matt's shoes, the main character, what would prevent me from just, on the extreme side, just going out and putting a bullet in the dog's head? On the less extreme side, making it someone else's problem by dropping the dog off somewhere and abandoning it. So I had to make Conehead not only the somewhat antagonist, but an asset to the characters in the story. And there's one pivotal moment in the book where you realize how much of an asset he is. And once I had that down, I was like, okay, the hard work is finished on my end. Now I can just kind of sit back and let the pieces fall where they may, because now we know it's vital that we keep this dog alive, even though he is kind of a harbinger of bad things. So to answer it in short,
Mhm.
uh, a lot of people have dogs. They resonate with readers. Um, and they naturally pop up in my stories because I've just typically written about families that have dogs because I've always had a dog.
Mhm. I still remember the whole hashtag thing about does the dog die and everyone's concern. And I just remember every time I saw one of those posts, I just like immediately jump in the comments and like, no, the dog is fine. Just go look all over social media. A lot of people have already mentioned it. Because I mean, we need, from a business standpoint, I need to keep the momentum going because I've had books that had few pre-orders, but they have an amazing launch, and then it just like, 3, 4 months later it dies down. So you want to try and
Mhm.
keep that momentum going. So when people start using hashtags and having conversations, it's go time. I mean, seriously. And I've told a lot of authors this as well, and you brought it up now. When they say you need to write what you know, it doesn't mean like, oh, I'm a teacher, I have to write about teachers. I'm a doctor, whatever, or where you live. It's actually just the stuff that you love, the stories you want to write with characters and themes that form part of your life. For instance, I mean, Mean Spirited, if you weren't a dad, you probably never would have thought of that. If and the things that happen to us, if those conversations didn't happen about the dog in the Exorcist's house, would Mean Spirited have happened? Um, so we bring into our work the things that have happened to us, life experiences, the good, the bad, the jobs we've had, the failures, everything. And that is why even though a lot of books have been repeated, like stories, everyone's is going to be different because you're different, and no one else can write the books that you have written. So, so let's quickly talk about what you said, the writer mind. Where did the writer mind come from for you? Like, at what age? What made you want to become a writer? Were you a fan of like horror and dark fiction first?
So, yeah, I'll just say before I was a fan of anything, I always had this voice in my head that wanted to tell stories that, for better or worse, would never shut up. And I had to figure out a way to channel that. And I remember early on going to like elementary school and being exposed. Well, first of all, my mom was an educator her whole life, and she read to me at bedtime when I was a little kid. And that's something I still remember some of those books, that and I do that for my kids. The value of reading to children at an early age, I cannot express how much how beneficial that is, not just for developing minds on a physiological level, but for enhancing creativity and giving them an appreciation of the written word and the experience of hearing and seeing a story versus just scrolling through a 20-second TikTok short. So, yeah, my mom instilled this love of reading early on. My dad, he had a bookcase of all of his books that he liked to read. And he had, I think my mom had like one copy of The Exorcist, and I still have her copy right over there on my bookshelf. But my dad was all about like legal thrillers like John Grisham and James Patterson and all that. So it was so normalized in my house, reading as a pastime that curated my own little children's library in my room. And, a lot of people credit Goosebumps and Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark as being, people of my age as being formative in their horror aesthetic. And that certainly was the case for me. But prior to that, there's an author, I don't know if you know him, a children's author named Chris Van Allsburg. And his work, I bet you know that the movies that his books have made, Jumanji, um, Zathura. These are books that he would write kids' books, but not tailor it, but not treat the children in the stories like not talk down to them. Like
Mm.
it was kids dealing with complex issues. And it was dark. It was like kind of like Twilight Zone and Black Mirror, but meets The Cat in the Hat. So that like darkness that I detected in his work led to Goosebumps. Um, I always like to draw monsters, and sooner or later, you know, that led to me drawing monsters talking to each other and making books and comics, and then it evolved into writing. And then I really got into movies. And that's when my creativity and my output really took off, was when I started watching and analyzing movies, reading screenplays, and then when DVDs came out with director commentaries and behind the scenes, I got to see how movies were made from inception to release date. And all through my life, movies were a constant. It wasn't until I would say my mid 20s that I got back into reading and writing because I was forced to. I went back to school, I went back to college and got my degree in English, and that kind of reignited my passion for reading that I had. And yeah, one thing led to another, and I got a short story submitted and accepted somewhere. And once I saw my name in print, it was a whole new addiction that opened up, and it became real. The fantasy of one day being published became attainable, but I knew I had to work at it.
No, that's awesome. Talking about movies, I know a lot of people are excited about the launch of your Nick Roberts, but film reviews and recommendations by Nick Roberts, which you're going to do right here on this YouTube channel, The House of Shadows and Ink. And we're going to start real soon. So tell us more about that.
Well, if you live in my house, then you would know that that is like the one thing I will not shut up about is like the last movie that I watched or something that happens. I'll say, "Oh, that reminds me of this that happened in this movie." And half the time, my wife is just looking at me like, "Why are you referencing some obscure 70s Italian horror movie right now at the dinner table?" And so, yeah, I'm super pumped to have an outlet, and hopefully, people will be interested in some of my insights and takes on different movies. And obviously, I haven't fully mapped out or developed what the series or show is going to be, but there's room in there to talk about brand new releases because I'll go the night before opening night and see
Mm.
a movie. there's room to talk about the classics, the movies that have flown under the radar that I feel deserve to have more light shed upon them. And there are movies that I feel if you like this book, you will love this movie. Or hey, did you know this movie was based on this book? So there are a lot of different angles that I can tackle with that, and I'll be happy to do any of them.
No, that's cool. And you do have experience with screenwriting as well, and of course, writing. And you are in the process of shopping around some of these books to producers. So you actually have the whole 9 yards of experience when it comes to movies and like the art that goes into it, the hard work that goes into it. So it's going to be a perfect combination.
And now I'm really starting to see the luck that goes into it because I mean, you have to work hard and you have to have a great product, but there has to be that person, that right combination of X meets Y and produces Z, for it to fully come to fruition. Um, my experience with the movie industry thus far is, let's say, is maybe like at the 10-yard line of going 100 yards to a touchdown. Um, when you see a movie based on one of my books in the theaters, that's when we score the touchdown. But um, yeah, I've written screenplays, nothing that I've been proud of, early on in my life, just because I loved that medium of just describing a scene and having it told through dialogue. That's why some readers uh, point out that they like the dialogue in my books because
Mm.
I'm naturally passionate about writing dialogue, especially in developing characters. I just think there's so much that can be shown about a character by what they say. Um, so, but yeah, right now I'm writing a screenplay based on one of my short stories called Sally Under the Bed. And that story was originally published in Sinister Smile Press's anthology Screaming in the Night. And um, then it got it got republished in the collection that Crystal Lake published called It Haunts the Mind and Other Stories. And I put that as the opening story because I think it is the scariest one that I have written. Um, I waver on calling it the most disturbing. I don't think it's the most disturbing. I do think it's the scariest in that and this is also coming from reader feedback, but my own barometer as a reader when I'm writing, it creeped me out. So when I hear about other readers talking about, thinking about someone under their bed or that story that I wrote, um, it lets me know that I achieved what I set out to. Now, when I was talking with my manager about which short stories to pursue or, produce, which ones to shop around, I was looking at current trends in the film industry and movies like Smile and uh, It Follows and The Ring. Uh, I'm blanking on like a few of them, but Mo Candyman, movies where a character, we'll call it the cursed subgenre. They encounter some kind of curse, and then the ticking clock starts, and they have to
Mm.
somehow figure it out, unravel the mystery, and they either fix it or they don't. So, Sally Under the Bed is the short story is is not you don't read it and say, okay, I see a movie there. There's not a huge arc. It's basically two scenes. Well, three. It's a reporter who specializes in investigating like paranormal type of things. and she has this lead on this local urban legend called Sally Under the Bed. She researches it. She finds this tragedy, this real life tragedy happened back in the 60s, and she goes and interviews the only survivor that she can find. And then the next scene, basically the bulk of that short story is this woman in her trailer, the survivor, recounting what happened the night that they played Sally Under the Bed when she was a little girl at a sleepover. And then we have the ending in the short story, which I won't spoil here. But in turning that into a screenplay, I had to think, okay, well, I've got the hook of Sally Under the Bed, the poem that if you say it out loud, this scary entity appears under your bed. I've got that hook. Why do I need to care about it? And that's the same way with like mean-spirited. Okay, I've got this, haunted dog, for lack of a better word. Why would people care about it? And that's where I have to come up with the story about the characters, the drama, the real life drama that they are going through. I always say that if I take the supernatural and the horror out of the story and it's still compelling, then that's when it's successful. So I'm in the process right now of writing the first draft, and I'm figuring out who these characters are, what's really their struggle, their story, and um, now it's scary because there are kind of somewhat high stakes involved in me turning in this screenplay, but it's a challenge, and I like that. So it's exciting, and we'll see what happens with it.
No, that's good. I always tell authors you have to challenge yourself. You have to try new things because that's the only way you're going to learn. And I mean, it's whether that specific project is successful or not, it's going to shape the rest of your career because you just learned like all these new skills. When another door opens, you're going to be ready. You're going to learn from this experience, learn from your mistakes. And when you do send this in and pitch it, tell them Crystal Lake Publishing's interested in doing the actual game, Sally Under the Bed. And we'll like use that to sell it extra hard to them. I mean, why not? If I saw a game, Sally Under the Bed, just the title alone would like freak me out for sure.
Hopefully, that's what other people will think as well.
Okay, so you talked a bit about well, we talked about the inspiration and like life experiences that goes into that we put into our work. And you mentioned addiction. So, and this is in all your work. I've seen this. I've actually seen a lot of, especially now with open submissions. I think because we've talked about it a lot. I'm seeing a lot more people, authors use this in their stories these days. So I'm not going to say you like started it, but it definitely picked up with people putting addiction as one of the character traits. So tell us about your experience with this. And I know it's been quite a ride for you. Um,
Yeah. So when I was, early on, I was like 12 years old. I think I had a minor surgery and got put on heavy prescription painkillers. And when you, if you remember when I talked about always having that voice in my head that never shut up, for a long time, especially in my, middle school years, that voice became increasingly negative. And once I took those prescription pills, I felt like how I felt other people felt. I felt, oh, I feel normal. I feel comfortable in my own skin. So at that point, I knew that I could always put some sort of outside substance in my body to change the way I feel about myself, whether that be alcohol, marijuana, pills, you name it. If it changed the way I thought, I wanted it. So I had a really rough road for about 10 years, and it ended up with me going to treatment in April of 2012, and I've been sober ever since. And You know,
Nice.
went I think I was 25 at the time. Um, so like I said, when I went back to school, when I went back to college, I was the older guy in the room. But I was thrilled to be there. I had been humbled by life and I had gratitude in the opportunities that I now had. Um, so, cut to a few years into my recovery and, things are going well. I'm still I was in school. I was, working, starting a family and, um, I was noticing, especially in like TV shows and movies, that anytime that there was a character who dealt with addiction, uh, or was quote unquote in recovery, their main character arc was will they or won't they relapse? And to me, that's the opposite of recovery. Um, if you're white knuckling it through the day to not use or not drink, if it's a daily struggle, then there's still an underlying problem. Now, the fact that you can make it through the day is a success, but I would highly recommend figuring out what that irritable, restless, discontent source is and working on that.
Mm.
Because when life happens, when people pass away, when you get cheated on, when you lose your job, when big things like this happen, and they will, you have a solid foundation in recovery to know that if I drink over this, it's not going to make anything better. It's throwing gasoline on the fire. Um, I'm at a point where I don't miss any of that. I don't feel like, man, I wish I could go out and have a few beers with my buddies. I lost that right, you know. But you know what? I gained a family. I have a life. I have a job. I get to write for a living. I have people who trust me now. I can take all that good or this one bottle of pills. That's my choice. So it's not a choice at all, when you think of it in terms of that. But so like I said, when I was watching people in recovery on TV and movies and how they were depicted, I thought to myself, I want to see a person in recovery just be um, going about daily life, living life on life's terms. They're not defined by that characteristic. And I want them to confront the ultimate evil and not think about, oh, I need to run and go get high to get through this. In fact, I want them to be the opposite in the story. I want them to be the light, the lighthouse when everybody else turns to darkness. Like they are the source of hope and strength because they've practiced it.
Mm.
And that's what led me to writing Anathema and the character of Ellie. When people ask me like who my favorite character is or if I've ever written myself into a story, ironically enough, it's a lot of people assume Ellie is my wife because I kind of describe her as looking like Amy and having the same kind of personality. But really, Ellie is me. Like her beliefs, her thoughts, her outlook on life at the time that I wrote that book, that was me 100% living through that character, as well as, Brian with his anger issues and yeah, so that was a personal book, but that's been a motivation was to change the stigma, the way in which people view people in recovery, and to have people in recovery feel seen in fiction. Um, so, like you said, as you're getting a lot of submissions with more characters who are in recovery, I mean, it could have a strong correlation with more authors who are in recovery because, in America, we're in the middle of an opioid epidemic,
Mm,
and we have as much as people are losing their lives, we're having people be in recovery and change their lives and go live to tell about it. So it does not shock me that you're having more authors who have experience with addiction and recovery write about it and not be scared to be judged. I mean, that's what I did my doctoral dissertation on was the stigma associated with hiring a person in recovery. So, yeah, that's
okay, that's good. And
my ramble.
I remember quite a few social media posts from other authors and readers thanking you for basically encouraging them, motivating them, going through addiction, because you are now that goal for them to reach 5 years down the line or whatever, where it isn't a daily struggle anymore, and how they connected with your books because of how you actually got it right. I remember there were a few people who actually said, finally, someone got it right about addiction.
Um, yes, thank you. And that's one reason why like the last line of my author bio will always say something about being a supporter of people in recovery or something like that because I try to do that and I don't want to sound like I want to share this but at the same time it sounds almost like I'm bragging but at least once a week, if not, more than that, I'll get private messages sent to me saying, just so either I've been struggling and your book helped, or I have a family member who struggled and now I understand what they were going through. You helped me get through this time. And those mean so much more to me than, hey, this book scared the hell out of me, 5 stars on Amazon. I like those. Nothing wrong with those. But when someone takes the time to message you and say, "Hey, I lost my son earlier this year and I just read your work and it really helped." That
Hmm.
makes it kind of all worthwhile.
No, that's true. Okay, so I saw also that you mentioned your wife has been a big like pillar of support for you, like during tough times, and like she was there when you needed her the most. And I don't want to get like too deep into this, but uh, your brother passed away a few years ago. I know that was a very tough time, and I was so thankful, glad that I knew you were not alone during that time. Your family was quite close.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I don't know if you want to talk about that. I really don't want to
No, you're fine.
push anything.
As like I was saying early on, life happens whether you're in recovery or not, and that was one of those blows that just completely changed the way the changed my whole life, my whole family dynamic. And we're still reeling from that sudden loss. And my wife has done so much more than just support me as an author. Um, she helped me become a better man. I mean, like before I met her, I was, immature. I mean, of course, this comes with getting older and whatnot. We've been together 10 years. Well, married 10 years. We've been together longer than that, but she changed me in so many ways. But, on the author front, she's not like a big horror lover. So the fact that she'll take the time to proofread my work, her. my wife and my mom are always my first two readers. One, because my mom was a lifelong educator and she can spot things that, like, I'm completely nose blind to reading my own stuff. I will gloss over anything
Mm.
because my brain just skips to the next sentence. That's why you should never self-edit unless you are just like extremely disciplined in that. I am not, but. My mom will read it, my wife will read it, and they are brutally honest. They have no problem critiquing me. I don't necessarily ask them for story input, but I will sometimes get it, and sometimes it really stings, especially coming from those two. But like I'll give you an example. When I wrote Dead End Tunnel, that was a Patreon exclusive novella that was like an experiment. I just wanted to write like one part per month and just see what happened. And it ended up kind of naturally wrapping itself up into this 10-part book. Um, and once it was finished on Patreon, I was going to publish it. And I hired, I've had my mom and wife read it. And, the first thing my mom said was, the mother character in this story is not very strong. In this scene, she reacts in this way, and it's just not great. And my pushback was genuine. I said, "Well, Mom, not all mothers are great. There are some mothers who would react in this situation. Not I, I, I can't depict every every woman that I write as being strong because, yes, there are, millions of strong, beautiful women out there, but I have encountered, especially being a person in recovery, people struggle with children. People make bad decisions with their children. And this woman in Dead End Tunnel at this point in time had been traumatized and was going through a lot, and she was making bad decisions. And I remember my mom said, "Okay, I hear you, but is that what you want to be putting out there? Is that the narrative you want to be contributing to?" And I was like, it really boiled down to me not wanting to go back and edit and change that character. But when I took her advice and went back and tweaked those scenes with changing the character, and taking my mom's suggestions, it changed the dynamic of the story. It elevated it. It made it uh it raised the stakes, and that was a big learning experience for me. I used to say, "Here, proofread this, not interested in any story feedback. I'm comfortable with my story.
Mm.
Just proofread it." That was a big one, big learning experience that, hey, the story can be improved too from other people. It's a collaborative experience. And I should have learned that with The Exorcist House because originally The Exorcist House, the manuscript I turned into you, it ended in the classroom with at the end of the school year with Nora still thinking about the house and what happened. And you're kind of left with, okay, what's going on in this woman's mind where she sees her family seems to have moved on, but something's not right with her.
Mm.
Something's haunting her mind. And it's very vague and ambiguous. Your editor, I forget which one it is, or I would credit this
Mm.
person, suggested, "I want another scene. I want to see them go pick up the kid from daycare." And I said, "Okay, I could write another chapter where they leave the school and go pick up the kid from daycare." And that's when that whole entire last chapter was because of an editor saying that I like these characters so much, I want to see this, I want to see another chapter. And when that book first came out, that was one of the biggest things people liked was the final scene.
Nice.
So yeah, authors, no matter how big your ego is, don't be afraid to take some constructive criticism, especially if it hurts, because that's most likely when it's true.
I've told some authors as well, and you do this quite well. You listen to your readers. You actually read all the reviews. You read what they post on social media, the Books of Horror Facebook group. I always recommend them. Yes, unless you're like very sensitive, go and read your Amazon reviews. Look for patterns. Like, what did people like? What didn't they like? Why didn't they like certain things? Don't like focus too much on just like one or two comments. If you start seeing it come up a lot, then it's something worth looking into, like whether it's realistic dialogue or three-dimensional characters not doing stuff that's out of their character or personality. So, and you've been really good at listening to your audience. And I think that they like that because you're involving them, you're taking them serious, you're not looking down at them, which is all very good. Well done.
I will say that um, I, the stuff that I get tagged in and the stuff that I see on Facebook and reviews that just naturally come into my feed, those are the ones I see. Like you said
Mm,
about having thin skin, I try to steer away from reading the reviews in Amazon because it's it's not that I can't take it because you can go and look at like To Kill a Mockingbird
mm,
or any other classic on Goodreads and find 101-star reviews. Okay, I understand that everything is subjective, but for me and the way my brain works, it's very obsessive. You can have 100 5-star reviews, and if I see one 4-star review, I'll focus on that and it'll eat away at me. And sometimes it's good, sometimes it'll help me change. Other times it makes me second guess myself and it stifles the creative process. So there is a balance there. But
mm,
like you said, when it comes up in trends, normally if it's a trend and it's a common thing that's bothering people, it bubbles to the surface of my Facebook feed. I don't have to go
mm.
looking for it.
That's good.
But
And
like I know I have author friends who read Amazon every day and have no problem with
mm,
doing that. It's just something like I check the ratings, but I don't get in depth with reviews anymore.
I think it actually has to do with the way that well, an author starts writing. I was involved back in 2008, 9, 10, thereabout with author forums where, authors post excerpts of their work and other authors come and they just like destroy it. And you just got used to it. And like you did the same with other people's stories. And you do that for years and years. And eventually it doesn't bother you at all because you realize what the purpose of the reviews are, and that someone who gives you a negative review for their own personal reasons, the issue is on their side, not your side. So, like trolls and that stuff, where some other authors learn how to write completely alone on their own, just through research and just writing. And they don't go through that stage of just being torn apart by other authors. So that might be the big difference there. And that does bring me to, social media, your following. You've been very good at being involved, being out there, being active on social media. You've got a newsletter, you've got Patreon, you're posting videos to TikTok. You do a lot of contests and challenges. Um, do you do the ideas just come, or do you purposefully sit down and think, how can I promote my work this month?
Both. And especially ever since I stepped out of the classroom and became a full-time author, and the financial situation really became a reality.
Mm,
Um, that's when, I mean, I was already doing well enough and felt comfortable enough to step out of the classroom. I would never make like an impulsive decision like that or put that burden on my family if I didn't fully believe in it and have a plan in place. But knowing that that safety net's gone, um, it makes me want to continue to try to innovate and diversify these revenue streams
Mm.
because I mean, you never know when anything could happen, and you never know when that's going to stop. Um, but I remember with Patreon, I was trying to think of something interesting to get people to want to subscribe to my channel on Patreon, and you know, aside from I'd like to. I don't want to use the word intimate because that could have a negative connotation. But aside from a more personal connection, whether it's in the chats or the Discord channel that's associated with my Patreon, they get like they get direct access to me like throughout the day. Like I'm checking Discord and Patreon and like responding to readers. So they have access to that at like, just by being a subscriber. But I thought, okay, if I if I were, I'm a reader, obviously, so what would I pay money for? I'd probably pay $5 to hear my favorite author talk to other authors. So I thought author interviews are something that would not only appeal to the patrons, but would appeal to me. And like I'm interested in interviewing Joe Lansdale.
Mm.
I'm interested in talking to Josh Mallerman about his craft. So, and not only am I feeding my own curiosity, I'm also networking with these people now. That's a very fortunate byproduct. It's by no means my driving force because if you read those interviews, I'm like selfishly asking them about their craft and about what I'm trying to pick their brains as much as
Mm.
possible, but doing it in an entertaining way as well. So the author interviews were there. Of course, I thought I needed to have exclusive content, so that's where I would write short stories and serialized novellas. But the a big light bulb moment occurred when this is what took my Patreon from, you know, one financial monthly payment to a whole different one was when I said, and it was just such a random thought. I'd just woken up, I had my phone. And I said, "Hey, do you want to be a character in one of my novels? Do you want to get offed in a Nick Roberts novel? Pay $50 a month and you will be killed in the next book." Blah, blah, blah. And I capped it off at a certain number. So it felt exclusive, one, and that'll drive people to want to be in that exclusive club. But two, I didn't want 50 people that I felt
Mm.
obligated to write into a story. So that 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 really worked out well. And and then of course now I have my advanced reader copy, my ARC group that's actually guaranteed entrance into my ARC group for my new releases is a tier or a perk on one of the tiers of Patreon. So when I'll get like when Exorcist House Resurrection, the arc is out right now, and uh, I was limiting it to I think my goal was like 50, and I had about like 40 people who were guaranteed a spot in there from Patreon, and the rest I just I kind of filled in by just asking um, other people, hey, you want to get in this group? But it's at like 75 and I cut it off at 75. And, so when people ask me, hey, how do I get into your art group? Let me read Resurrection, 2 months before everybody else. And I was like, well, I've got people who literally pay me and support me and enable me to write this that I give first admission to.
Mm.
So, and that by no means guarantees that they're going to write favorable reviews. And I by no means push that upon them. All I ask is that once they're granted entrance into the art group, that they write an honest review because they're basically taking up a seat
Mm.
if they're not going to write a review. So that's my whole take on it. I
Okay.
don't like. I know a lot of people will go into like groups, like ARC reading groups, and offer their works for free for reviews. From a business standpoint, I've always said make it look exclusive. Don't make it look like you're asking for reviews. Make it look like you're letting people read your stuff early.
Mm.
So that's just my take on it.
No, that's good. And that does bring up the topic of the Exorcist House Resurrection. Um, I don't know who gave you such a horrible deadline, but I know you had quite a, quite a time finishing it and writing it. And just tell us about that journey and without like giving away too much about the book coming out soon.
So, yeah, with Resurrection, I had I knew that there was another story within the universe to be told. There was a blank space of time in that universe that I'd established. And, within the whole mythos of this one character, I've already established this character's end. And with Genesis, the previous book in the series, uh, I've, went back to the beginnings of that old farmer Merle and his early days of being a backwoods exorcist and figuring out what to do and what not to do. So I had this time period from like the 60s all the way up until, if you do the math, it's actually like a few years in the future when Anathema Legacy occurs. But so with Resurrection, I had this gap between 1997 and 2018. What happened to this character? So I knew that I knew it was going to be challenging because readers of the Anathema series cannot, if they didn't know the Exorcist House universe existed, they would be perfectly fine. Anathema stands on its own. Those two books stand on their own. The Exorcist House books stand on their own. But when you read them back and forth, you kind of have there's a little brain melting that happens when you realize the connections. But with Resurrection, I really wanted to take it back to the basics because the original The Exorcist House, I think, is the least like the book The Exorcist. William Peter Blatty's book, The Exorcist, and the film, he wrote the script, is a very, very intimate, like one setting,
Mm.
mother drama or mother-daughter drama. And, of course, it's the Catholic priests kind of come in and out and then really kind of take over in the third act. But the story is so small and intimate. And, the first Exorcist house was like this roller coaster ride through hell that's more akin to like The Conjuring or the Amityville Horror. It felt more fun, even though really horrible and traumatic things happen in it. It felt more fun compared to stuff that was happening in Anathema. And then when I wrote Genesis, the second book, I got to write the prequel or the backstory of Merle, which was sort of a prequel, and I got to write what happens after the Hill family leaves the farm, which was sort of a sequel. Um, that was really creatively fulfilling, but um, it got a little bit darker than the first Exorcist house, and it definitely grew in scope. Just in telling a dual timeline, It's the longest of the three books. I
Mm.
think it's like 105,000 words, and the other ones range between 80 and 90,000, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, it's basically two books that parallel each other. And Genesis is not like my favorite book of the three. It's because I think that they're so different, but it's my most ambitious, and I think it's the one I'm most proud of because I really didn't know if I could pull off the dual timelines intersecting. So by the time I got to Resurrection, I said, I want to take it back to the basics. I want to really look and think about what The Exorcist did right. And, I had this character of Nora and her daughter, and I wanted it to take place over a certain amount of time at different pivotal moments in their lives that really led to this downfall. But people may think they know what is going to happen, and it was my job to subvert that. And the best compliments I've gotten from my ARC readers so far, aside from them creating an entire support group on Facebook once they finish reading it, the best compliment was that it was not at all what they expected, and they viewed who was previously an evil character completely different. They
Mm.
empathized with how that character became evil. So that was my whole goal, was to subvert people's expectations, to write a subdued, intimate story between a mother and a daughter. And like I said, when you take the scary stuff out, it's still, I believe, a compelling story of people getting through trauma, trying to move on, and ultimately facing the demons of their past.
No, that's very good. And I have to add that when you sent in that finished draft, it was quite a shuffle between all our editors to see who gets to get like pick it up first. And the feedback from the editors and the proofreaders, everyone was like, it's the best one yet. They don't know how you pulled it off, but it's the best one yet. So well done. I can't wait to like release day to see like, everyone respond to. And of course the early ARC readers as well. I'm starting to see their reviews pop up already. So it's going to be very exciting. So to end off, any advice for up and coming authors and anything you want to say to readers who haven't picked up your books yet, what they can expect?
So for up and coming authors, I'll address this because it's a question I get asked a lot is, okay, I've finished my draft. What next? Can you help me? Can you point me in the right direction? I've got this story, this manuscript. What do I do? Do I get an agent? Do I try to publish it? Do I self-publish it? Uh, when you have a manuscript completed and it's the best it can possibly be with the resources you have, really research the different routes to publication because they change and they're evolving. But, you know, my personal experience was I didn't know enough about self-publishing to do it correctly. So I wanted to aim as high as possible and submit to an agent, have them submit or sell it to a big publishing house so I could sit back and focus on nothing but writing because I still thought that existed for people other than Stephen King. But that was my dream. So if that is your dream, you're going to have to a lot of work into looking into the art of writing a query letter and the art of finding an agent who is representing other authors that you like, who is selling books to publishers. And don't get upset if you get rejected because agents aren't necessarily latching on to stuff that they love. It's more about what they can sell. And if they know they can sell something, they'll grab it. Um, if you want to do the self-publishing route, make sure you know what you're doing because You only get one debut novel. And personally, I didn't have the confidence to self-publish my debut novel. I held out until I had a publisher who knew how to format and edit and put together a cover wrap and upload these documents and all this stuff that I had no idea what to do. So I did that with a very micro press, who's no longer even in existence. They went under during COVID, and all my first book rights reverted back to me. But so like when I get this question, I always say, if you're not sure what to do, what worked for me and what helped me take it to the next level was submitting to an indie publisher who, from looking at their track record, knew what they were doing. And that's how I came up on Crystal Lake and submitting The Exorcist House to you. And, learning so much about the process and having you all do everything on your end to make it the best possible book it could be. And I waited 2 years, I think it was,
Hmm.
from the time I submitted to the time it came out because I believed in Crystal Lake. I didn't want another occurrence of what happened the first
Mm.
time. So, yeah, that's my advice to up and comers. Look at who you're submitting to. Don't be desperate. Don't settle. And, um, you know, be prepared to do the work because it's a lot more than just typing the end. That's kind of where the work begins.
Mm.
So, yeah.
Oh, cool. And for the readers out there?
Um, Readers, you can expect from me. I'm currently, I talked about I'm writing the screenplay. I'm writing my Patreon novella right now called My Corpse Has a Heartbeat. I just finished part 7 of that. It's my first person serial killer novel, and that's like I'm trying to subvert the fetishization, I guess, the obsession we have with true crime and how we hold these real life atrocities up on a pedestal as entertainment. And I'm not trying to write American Psycho. I'm not trying to write Mayfly, or I'm not trying to write Dexter. I'm writing something that is meant to challenge and and ruffle some feathers and belief systems and hold up a mirror. So if I do my
Mm.
job with that book, it's going to scare people, it's going to lull them into some entertainment and then make them feel like crap by the time by the time they finish it. But yeah, and I have a new book coming out in January with Simon and Schuster called Lila in the Flesh, and I'll begin promoting that later this year. But right now, it's all about the Exorcist House Resurrection coming out September 12th.
Mm.
And we also have the hardcover limited edition that I am thrilled with that readers can order now until the end of August. And hopefully, if we time everything correctly, all these editions will be coming out relatively the same time of release date of September 12th. So, um, yeah, I
No,
think that's all I've got going on right now.
no, that's awesome. And I will put all the links to all the books, the limited edition, everything in the description. I'll add your newsletter link there, your Patreon, because people need to follow. And of course, look out for Nick's film reviews and stuff right here on the House of Shadows and Ink. Thanks, Nick. This has been awesome. I'm sure we're going to see a lot more of you, of your work, of you right here on YouTube. And I can't wait to see what's next and what you do. So thanks a lot.
Thank you. It's going to be a lot less talking about me and a lot more talking about movies here at the
Oh,
House of
awesome.
Shadows and Ink. So can't
Uh,
wait.
Cheers.